Video 7. Faithful said, "Well, my brother, I am bound to believe you, not only because you say you know him, but also because, like a Christian, you make your reports of men. For I cannot think that you speak these things of ill will, but because it is even so as you say." Christian replied, "Had I known him no more than you, I might perhaps have thought of him as at first you did. Yea, had I received this report at their hands, only that our enemies to religion, I should have thought it had been a slander, a lot that often falls from bad men's mouths upon a good men's names and professions. But all these things, yea, and a great many more as bad, of my own knowledge, I can prove him guilty of. Besides, good men are ashamed of him. They can neither call him brother nor friend. The very naming of him among them makes them blush if they know him." "Well," said Faithful, "I see that saying and doing are two things, and hereafter I shall better observe this distinction." "Yes," said Christian, "they are two things indeed, and are as diverse as are the soul and the body. For as the body without the soul is but a dead carcass, so saying, if it be alone, is but a dead carcass also. The soul of religion is the practical part. Pure religion, as undefiled before God and the Father, is this: to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. This Talkative is not aware of. He thinks that hearing and saying will make a good Christian, and thus he deceiveth his own soul. Hearing is but as the sowing of the seed. Talking is not sufficient to prove that fruit is indeed in the heart and life. And let us assure ourselves that at the day of doom men shall be judged according to their fruits. It will not be said then, 'Did you believe?' but, 'Were you doers or talkers only?' And accordingly shall they be judged. The end of the world is compared to our harvest, and you know men at harvest regard nothing but fruit. Not that anything can be accepted that is not of faith, but I speak this to show you how insignificant the profession of Talkative will be at that day." Faithful said, "This brings to mind that of Moses, by which he describeth the beast that is clean. He is such a one that parteth the hoof and cheweth the cud, not that parteth the hoof only, or that cheweth the cud only. The hare cheweth the cud, but yet is unclean, because he parteth not the hoof. And this truly resembleth Talkative. He cheweth the cud, he seeketh knowledge, he cheweth upon the word, but he divideth not the hoof. He parteth not with the way of sinners, but as the hare, he retaineth the foot of the dog or bear, and therefore he is unclean." Christian replied, "You have spoken. For aught I know, the true gospel sense of these texts, and I will add another thing. Paul calleth some men, yea, and those great talkers too, sounding brass and tinkling cymbals, that is, as he expounds them in another place, things without life giving sound. Things without life, that is, without the true faith and grace of the gospel, and consequently things that shall never be placed in the kingdom of heaven among those that are the children of life, though their sound, by their talk, be as if it were the tongue or voice of an angel." "Well," said Faithful, "I was not so fond of his company at first, but I am sick of it now. What shall we do to be rid of him?" "Take my advice," said Christian, "and do as I bid you, and you shall find that he will soon be sick of your company too, except God shall touch his heart and turn it." "What would you have me do?" said Faithful. "Why," said Christian, "go to him and enter into some serious discourse about the power of religion, and ask him plainly, when he has approved of it, for that he will, whether this thing be set up in his heart, house, or conversation. Then Faithful stepped forward again and said to Talkative, "Come, what cheer? How is it now?" Talkative said, "Thank you, well. I thought we should have had a great deal of talk by this time." "Well," said Faithful, "if you will, we will fall into it now. And since you left it with me to state the question, let it be this. How doth the saving grace of God discover itself when it is in the heart of a man?" "Ah," Talkative said, "I perceive then that our talk must be about the power of things. Well, it is a very good question, and I shall be willing to answer you, and take my answer in brief, thus. First, where the grace of God is in the heart, it causeth there a great outcry against sin. Secondly, Nay, hold," said Faithful. "Let us consider of one at once. I think you should rather say, it shows itself by inclining the soul to abhor its sin." "Why," said Talkative, "what difference is there between crying out against and abhorring of sin?" "Oh, a great deal," said Faithful. "A man may cry out against sin of policy, but he cannot abhor it but by virtue of a godly antipathy against it. I have heard many cry out against sin in the pulpit, who yet can abide it well enough in the heart, house, and conversation. Joseph's mistress cried out with a loud voice, as if she had been very holy, but she would willingly, notwithstanding that, have committed uncleanness with him. Some cry out against sin, even as the mother cries out against her child in her lap, when she calleth it a naughty girl, and then falls to hugging and kissing it." "You lie at the catch, I perceive," said Talkative. Faithful, "No, not I. I am only for setting things right. But what is the second thing whereby you would prove a discovery of a work of grace in the heart?" "Great knowledge of gospel mysteries," said Talkative. Faithful replied, "This sign should have been first, but first or last it is also false. For knowledge, great knowledge, may be obtained in the mysteries of the gospel, and yet no work of grace in the soul. Yea, if a man have all knowledge, he may yet be nothing, and so, consequently, be no child of God. When Christ said, 'Do you know all these things?' and the disciples had answered, 'Yes,' he added, 'Blessed are ye if ye do them.' He doth not lay the blessing in the knowing of them, but in the doing of them. For there is a knowledge that is not attended with doing. He that knoweth his master's will and doeth it not. A man may know like an angel and yet be no Christian. Therefore your sign of it is not true. Indeed, to know is a thing that pleaseth talkers and boasters, but to do is that which pleaseth God. Not that the heart can be good without knowledge, for without that the heart is naught. There is therefore knowledge and knowledge, knowledge that resteth in the bare speculation of things, and knowledge that is accompanied with the grace of faith and love, which puts a man upon doing even the will of God from the heart. The first of these will serve the talker, but without the other, the true Christian is not content. Give me understanding, and I shall keep thy law. Yea, I shall observe it with my whole heart." Then Talkative said, "You lie at the catch again. This is not for edification." Faithful replied, "Well, if you please, propound another sign how this work of grace discovereth itself where it is." Talkative said, "Not I, for I see we shall not agree." "Well, if you will not," said Faithful, "will you give me leave to do it?" "You may use your liberty," said Talkative. So Faithful continued, "A work of grace in the soul discovereth itself either to him that hath it or to standers by. To him that have it thus, It gives him conviction of sin, especially of the defilement of his nature, and the sin of unbelief, for the sake of which he is sure to be damned, if he findeth not mercy at God's hand by faith in Jesus Christ. This sight and sense of things worketh in him sorrow and shame for sin. He findeth, moreover, revealed in him the Saviour of the world, and the absolute necessity of closing with him for life, at the which he findeth hungerings and thirstings after him, to which hungerings, etc., the promise is made. Now, according to the strength or weakness of his faith in his Saviour, so is his joy and peace, so is his love to holiness, so are his desires to know him more, and also to serve him in this world. But though, I say, it discovereth itself thus unto him, yet it is but seldom that he is able to conclude that this is a work of grace, because his corruptions now, and his abused reason, make his mind to misjudge in this matter. Therefore in him that hath this work there is required a very sound judgment, before he can with steadiness conclude that this is a work of grace. To others it is thus discovered. 1. By an experiential confession of his faith in Christ. 2. By a life answerable to that confession, to wit, a life of holiness, heart holiness, family holiness, if he hath a family, and by conversation holiness in the world, which in the general teacheth him inwardly to abhor his sin, and himself for that in secret, to suppress it in his family, and to promote holiness in the world, not by talk only, as a hypocrite or talkative person may do, but by a practical subjection in faith and love to the power of the word. And now, sir, as to this brief description of the work of grace, and also the discovery of it, if you have aught to object, object. If not, then give me leave to propound to you a second question. Talkative said, Nay, my part is not now to object, but to hear. Let me therefore have your second question. Faithful said, It is this. Do you experience this part of this description of it, and doth your life and conversation testify the same? Or standeth your religion in word or tongue, and not in deed and truth? Pray, if you incline to answer me in this, say no more than you know the God above will say amen to, and also nothing but what your conscience can justify you in. For not he that commandeth himself is approved, but whom the Lord commendeth. Besides, to say, I am thus and thus, when my conversation and all my neighbours tell me I lie, is great wickedness. Then Talkative at first began to blush, but recovering himself, thus he replied, You come now to experience, to conscience, and to God, and to appeal to him for justification of what is spoken. This kind of discourse I did not expect, nor am I disposed to give an answer to such questions, because I count not myself bound thereto, unless you take upon you to be a catechiser, and though you should do so, yet I may refuse to make you my judge. But I pray, will you tell me why you ask me such questions? Faithful replied, Because I saw you forward to talk, and because I knew not that you had aught else but notion. Besides, to tell you all the truth, I have heard of you, that you are a man whose religion lies in talk, and that your conversation gives this, your mouth profession, the lie. They say you are a spot among Christians, and that religion fareth the worse for your ungodly conversation, that some have already stumbled at your wicked ways, and that more are in danger of being destroyed thereby. Your religion, and an alehouse, and covetousness, and uncleanness, and swearing, and lying, and vain company keeping, etc., will stand together. The proverb is true of you, which is said of a whore, to wit, that she is a shame to all women. So you are a shame to all professors. Talkative said, Since you are ready to take up reports and to judge so rashly as you do, I cannot but conclude that you are some peevish or melancholy man, not fit to be discoursed with, and so adieu. Then came up Christian and said to his brother, I told you how it would happen. Your words and his lusts could not agree. He had rather leave your company than reform his life. But he is gone, as I said. Let him go. The loss is no man's but his own. He has saved us the trouble of going from him, for he continuing, as I suppose he will do, as he is, he will have been but a blot in our company. Besides, the apostle says, Flee from such people. Faithful. But I am glad we had this little discourse with him. It may happen that he will think of it again. However, I have dealt plainly with him, and so am clear of his blood, if he perisheth. Christian. You did well to talk so plainly to him as you did. There is but little of this faithful dealing with men nowadays, and that makes religion to stink so in the nostrils of many as it doth. For they are these talkative fools, whose religion is only in word, and are debauched and vain in their conversation, that, being so much admitted into the fellowship of the godly, do puzzle the world, blemish Christianity, and grieve the sincere. I wish that all men would deal with such as you have done. Then should they either be made more comfortable to religion, or the company of saints would be too hot for them. Then did Faithful say, How talkative at first lifts up his plumes, how bravely doth he speak, how he presumes to drive down all before him, but so soon as Faithful talks of hard work, like the moon that's past the full, into the wane he goes, and so will all but he that hard work knows. Thus they went on, talking of what they had seen by the way, and so made that way easy, which would otherwise no doubt have been tedious to them, for now they went through a wilderness. Now when they were got almost quite out of this wilderness, Faithful chanced to cast his eye back, and espied one coming after them, and he knew him. Oh, said Faithful to his brother, who comes yonder? Then Christian looked and said, It is my good friend Evangelist. Ay, and my good friend too, said Faithful, for it was he that set me the way to the gate. Now was Evangelist come up to them, and thus saluted them. Peace be unto you, dearly beloved, and peace be to your helpers, said Evangelist. Welcome, welcome, my good Evangelist, said Christian. The sight of thy countenance brings to my remembrance thy ancient kindness and unwearied labouring for my eternal good. And Faithful said, And 1,000 times welcome. Welcome thy company, O sweet Evangelist. How desirable it is to us poor pilgrims. Then said Evangelist, How hath it fared with you, my friends, since the time of our last parting? What have you met with, and how have you behaved yourselves? Then Christian and Faithful told him of all things that had happened to them in the way, and how and with what difficulty they had arrived to that place. Right glad am I, said Evangelist, not that you have met with trials, but that you have been victors, for that you have, notwithstanding many weaknesses, continued in the way to this very day. I say, right glad am I of this thing, for that for mine own sake and yours, I have sowed and you have reaped, and the day is coming, when both he that soweth and they that reap shall rejoice together. That is, if you hold out. For in due time you shall reap, if ye faint not. The crown is before you, and it is an incorruptible one. So run that you may obtain it. Some there be that set out for this crown, and after they have gone far for it, another comes in and takes it from them. Hold fast, therefore, that which you have. Let no man take your crown. You are not yet out of the gunshot of the devil. You have not yet resisted unto blood, striving against sin. Let the kingdom be always before you, and believe steadfastly concerning things that are invisible. Let nothing that is on this side, the other world, get within you. And above all, look well to your own hearts and to the lusts thereof, for they are deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Set your faces like flint. You have all power in heaven and earth on your side. Then Christian thanked him for his exhortation, but told him withal that they would have him speak further to them for their help the rest of the way, and the rather, for that they well knew that he was a prophet, and could tell them of things that might happen unto them, and also how they might resist and overcome them. To which request Faithful also consented. So Evangelist began as followeth. Evangelist. My sons, you have heard in the words of the truth of the gospel, that you must through many tribulations enter into the kingdom of heaven, and again, that in every city bonds and afflictions abide on you, and therefore you cannot expect that you should go long on your pilgrimage without them, in some sort or other. You have found something of the truth of these testimonies upon you already, and more will immediately follow. For now, as you see, you are almost out of this wilderness, and therefore you will soon come into a town that you will by and by see before you. And in that town you will be hardly beset with enemies, who will strain hard, but they will kill you. And be sure that one or both of you must seal the testimony which you hold with blood. But be you faithful unto death, and the King will give you a crown of life. He that shall die there, although his death will be unnatural, and his pain perhaps great, he will yet have the better of his fellow, not only because he will be arrived at the celestial city soonest, but because he will escape many miseries that the other will meet with in the rest of his journey. But when you are come to the town, and shall find fulfilled what I have here related, then remember your friend, and quit yourselves like men, and commit the keeping of your souls to God in well-doing, as unto a faithful Creator. Then I saw in my dream that when they were got out of the wilderness, they presently saw a town before them, and the name of that town is Vanity. And at the town there is a fair kept, called Vanity Fair. It is kept all the year long. It beareth the name of Vanity Fair, because the town where it is kept is lighter than vanity, and also because all that is there sold, or that cometh thither, is vanity, as is the saying of the wise, all that cometh is vanity. This fair is no new erected business, but a thing of ancient standing. I will show you the original of it. Almost 5,000 years agone, there were pilgrims walking to the celestial city, as these two honest persons are, and Beelzebub, Apollyon, and Legion, with their companions, perceiving by the path that the pilgrims made their way to the city, lay through this town of Vanity. They contrived here to set up a fair wherein should be sold all sorts of vanity, and that it should last all the year long. Therefore, at this fair, are all such merchandise sold as houses, lands, trades, places, honours, preferments, titles, countries, kingdoms, lusts, pleasures, and delights of all sorts, as halls, boards, wives, husbands, children, masters, servants, lives, blood, bodies, souls, silver, gold, pearls, precious stones, and what not. And moreover, at this fair there is at all times to be seen jugglings, cheats, games, plays, fools, apes, knaves, and rogues, and that of every kind. Here are to be seen too, and that for nothing, thefts, murders, adulteries, false swearers, and that of a blood-red colour. And, as in other fairs of less moment, there are the several rows and streets under their proper names, where such and such wares are vended. So here likewise you have the proper places, rows, streets, namely countries and kingdoms, where the wares of this fair are soonest to be found. Here is the Briton row, the French row, the Italian row, the Spanish row, the German row, where several sorts of vanities are to be sold. But as in other fairs, some one commodity is as the chief of all the fair, so the ware of Rome and her merchandise is greatly promoted in this fair. Only our English nation, with some others, have taken a dislike thereat. Now, as I said, the way to the celestial city lies just through this town, where this lusty fair is kept, and he that will go to the city and yet not go through this town must needs go out of the world. The Prince of Princes himself, when here, went through this town to his own country, and that upon a fair day too, yea, and, as I think, it was Beelzebub, the chief lord of this fair, that invited him to buy of his vanities. Yea, he would have made him lord of the fair, would he but have done him reverence as he went through the town. Yea, because he was such a person of honour, Beelzebub had him from street to street, and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a little time, that he might, if possible, allure that blessed one to cheapen and buy some of his vanities. But he had no mind to the merchandise, and therefore left the town without laying so much as 1 farthing upon these vanities. This fair, therefore, is an ancient thing of long standing, and a very great fair. Now these pilgrims, as I said, must need go through this fair. Well, so they did, but behold, even as they entered into the fair, all the people in the fair were moved, and the town itself, as it were, in a hubbub about them, and that for several reasons. First, the pilgrims were clothed with such kind of raiment as was diverse from the raiment of any that traded in that fair. The people, therefore, of the fair made a great gazing upon them. Some said they were fools, some they were bedlams, and some outlandish men. Secondly, and as they wondered at their apparel, so they did likewise at their speech, for few could understand what they said. They naturally spoke the language of Canaan, but they that kept the fair were the men of this world, so that from one end of the fair to the other they seemed barbarians each to the other. Thirdly, but that which did not a little amuse the merchandisers was that these pilgrims set very light by all their wares. They cared not so much as to look upon them, and if they called upon them to buy, they would put their fingers in their ears and cry, "Turn away mine eyes from beholding vanity," and look upwards, signifying that their trade and traffic was in heaven. One chanced mockingly, beholding the carriage of the men, to say unto them, "What will ye buy?" But they, looking gravely upon him, said, "We buy the truth." At that there was an occasion taken to despise the men the more, some mocking, some taunting, some speaking reproachfully, and some calling upon others to smite them. At last things came to a hubbub and great stir in the fair, insomuch that all order was confounded. Now was a word presently brought to the great one of the fair, who quickly came down and deputed some of his most trusty friends to take those men into examination, about whom the fair was almost overturned. So the men were brought to examination, and they that sat upon them asked whence they came, whither they went, and what they did there, in such an unusual garb. The men told them that they were pilgrims and strangers in this world, and that they were going to their own country, which was in the heavenly Jerusalem, and that they had given no occasion to the men of the town, nor yet to the merchandisers, thus to abuse them, and to let them in their journey, except it was for that, when one asked them what they would buy, they said they would buy the truth. But they were appointed to examine them. They did not believe them to be any other than bedlams and mad, or else such as came to put all things into a confusion in the fair. Therefore they took them and beat them, and besmeared them with dirt, and then put them into the cage, that they might be made a spectacle to all the men of the fair. There, therefore, they lay for some time, and were made the objects of any man's sport, or malice, or revenge, the great one of the fair laughing still at all that befell them. But the men being patient, and not rendering railing for railing, but contrariwise blessing, and giving good works for bad, and kindness for injuries done, some men in the fair, that were more observing and less prejudiced than the rest, began to check and blame the baser sort for their continual abuses done by them to the men. They therefore, in angry manner, let fly at them again, counting them as bad as the men in the cage, and telling them that they seemed confederates and should be made partakers of their misfortunes. The others replied that, for aught they could see, the men were quiet and sober, and intended nobody any harm, and that there were many that traded in the fair that were more worthy to be put into the cage, yea, and pillory too, than were the men that they had abused. Thus, after divers words had passed on both sides, the men behaving themselves all the while very wisely and soberly before them, they fell to some blows, and did harm one to another. Then were these two poor men brought before the examiners again, and they charged as being guilty of the late hubbub that had been in the fair. So they beat them pitifully, and hanged irons upon them, and led them in chains up and down the fair, for an example and terror to others, lest any should speak on their behalf, or join themselves unto them. But Christian and faithful behaved themselves yet more wisely, and received the ignominy and shame that was cast upon them, with so much meekness and patience, that it won to their side, though but few in comparison of the rest, several of the men in the fair. This put the other party yet into a greater rage, insomuch that they concluded the death of these two men, wherefore they threatened that the cage nor irons should serve their turn, but that they should die for the abuse they had done, and for deluding the men of the fair.